Well, the situation continues when it comes to security, and we're discoursing on it from the EJURA riots to what happened yesterday in the Upper West region, WA to be specific. We discourse with Martin Kpebu, a lawyer who will be giving us the legal outlook when it comes to what has been happening. And then we also have joining the conversation Emmanuel Bombande, a security analyst. Later on the show, we'll also be joined by Professor Kwesi Enning, also a security analyst, and of course with the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. But gentlemen, thank you so much for joining the conversation on the AM show.
You're welcome.
Hello. Good morning to your viewers.
Great. Thank you for connecting. So far, let's start from here, especially on the back of what has happened in EJURA. We have the response currently when it comes to the three-member committee that has been set up to investigate the issue. Some have called for a commission of inquiry, which would raise it from a ministerial to a presidential level. Starting with you, Mr. Bombande, what is your quick reaction to that? Apt?
Well, I think what is important at the end of the day is to have value for a process that can be comprehensive enough, but at the same time, see the type of recommendations to be implemented because there is a political will to implement them. Rather than debate. Of course, everybody appreciates that a commission would be a much higher and elevated search for the type of recommendations that can be more comprehensive. But even if in the circumstances the commission is not what is in place, but rather an inquiry, what Ghanaians should be interested in at the end of the day is, can it bring the type of reform that can improve upon the situation of how the police, and when the police are joined by the military, any joint effort then can respect the rule of law, can respect the dignity of the human person, can provide a type of security that is democratic, but more importantly, if there are key recommendations to be implemented, that it is not just put on the shelf, but that it is truly implemented for Ghanaians to begin to have a sense of confidence that learning out of the challenges that occurred, something would happen differently. And I would want to make the comment later on about process. For me is more important than simply looking at the incident itself and trying to understand what happened with the incident, because that will not be sufficient. I'm more interested in what kind of process the inquiry will take to be able to unearth and be more comprehensive in dealing with this menace.
Now, my follow-up question on that would have to do with how much trust you have in the process. Some have said that, well, a committee being set up will not amount to much. Even we saw what happened with the Emil Short Commission on the back of happenings in Ayawaso, West Wuogon, and the government's own subsequent white paper. So some have said that if a presidential commission came out with that and that practically amounted to nothing, what would a committee, a ministerial committee, yield? Do you feel this committee is going to be effective, so to speak?
Well, I guess the decision makers and the committee itself will be guided by the observation you just made. And let me put it this way. I postulate that if the Fix My Country youth campaign group had gone ahead with the police understanding exactly that protests are permissible in democratic societies and that they were allowed to protest, that would have let out the type of pressure that has been building, and we probably would not have had EJURA. And that's what I mean by trying to be comprehensive, trying to understand that when you prevent something from happening because you are suppressing young people from expressing themselves, what then begins to happen is you see a build-up. And that build-up is like a pressure cooker in which there has to be a vent to let out the pressure. And to that extent, therefore, Mohammed Kaka, in continuing his activism, might not have arrived at the stage in which the circumstances in which he was killed could have happened, let alone now for the security response to have killed 2 more people. And that is why everything that happens in a democratic society is for a good reason. The reason why protests and demonstrations are part of democratic culture is to allow a peaceful venting and letting out of frustrations that now makes it possible to continue to channel any anger that might have built up to the point that society continues to manage itself. Now, the alternative is what the police hierarchy have been doing. But each time they prevented the demonstration, the meaningfulness of their argument fell flat when the young people saw that other gatherings, whether they were in funerals, whether they were in parties, were occurring. So it made meaningless the police argument that the fixed mercantile demonstrations could not go on. And so the committee has to look comprehensively at the circumstances that led to EJURA and not just the incident itself, and to now be able to properly advise, especially that it's under the Ministry of the Interior, for the police to go back and learn the lessons of how they are a police of a democratic Republic of Ghana, and not a police that simply makes decisions to be able to get their way out, when at the end of the day, they end up creating more challenges for themselves.
Okay, let me come briefly to Martin Kpebu. And I know you're raring to go, Mr. Kpebu, on the WA situation. We'll be getting to that shortly. But on EJURA, briefly, 2 quick questions. How apt is the setting up of a committee to probe this matter? And secondly, the legal dimensions to it. Officers every now and then, you know, getting involved in some skirmishes with, maybe in this instance, irate youth. And the fact that we lost Kaka and now 2 others on the back of that incident. What is your reaction?
Yeah, so the reaction first. My reaction is that we've not learned from our past. I mean, in terms of past incidents of police violence against unarmed citizens. It's such a shame that we sat down and allowed this incident to happen again. Look, from the Acha report, okay, in the 90s, to the Okujeto Stadium disaster report, it's been consistently noted that our police and other, so those who are specifically on the police, are not good at crowd control. So I can't understand how we allowed this thing to happen again. Because if you read those reports, they've consistently said that the police should be trained in crowd control. This small crowd, we allowed this thing to happen. It means that we are not learning, and that's a shame. Okay, it's a shame on the police service that they allowed this small crowd, they couldn't control, and they had to bring in military to shoot. Okay, just anyhow, resulting in the deaths of those 2 people. And that's a big indictment on the police service. What are they doing with those reports? The Acha report, the Okujeto Stadium disaster report. The Okujeto Stadium disaster report. Remember the May 9th incident, okay? Yes, so it's such a sad situation that we are not learning. We are supposed to be developing day in, day out. We are supposed to improve ourselves. But it appears Ghana Police Service is not willing to, when it comes to crowd control. Okay, a problem we identified over 20 years ago, we don't seem to be taking any steps to solve that problem. I mean, it breaks my heart that this is the state of affairs. Okay, so now, I think your question was in 2 parts, the reaction, and then can you remind me the second part?
So the legal dimensions to look at, beyond the committee that has been set up, getting, you know, justice for those whose lives have been lost? What are the legal, consequences or the legal ramifications to consider?
But if I may, good morning, Mr. Martin Pebu and Mr. Bombande. My name is Mama Vioso. You're doing this with Benjamin Akapo. Mr. Pebu, there have been concerns raised, particularly by the minority in Parliament, about the limitations that a ministerial committee such as the one that has been outdoor will have. So, for instance, are they going to force people to give them accounts of what happened, when they're asking people to give them documents? What do you see can happen with this committee that may not make its work successful?
Yes, Mama, I don't see so far anything that will make it not work. I'll come to the detailed answers. Once again, we have our past to guide us. The first question we should be asking is that what do we seek to achieve with the committee? Look, the committee has its own advantages, okay, over the Commission of Inquiry. Just as a Commission of Inquiry also has its own advantages over a committee, depending on what you want to find. Look, Amadi and Akaku, it's clear to me that this particular case, we want to see prosecution of those policemen. So if you want to see a prosecution of those policemen, I think we should go with the committee, because people will come and give evidence there of their own volition, okay? And then subsequently, we will have the prosecution with our arguments that when you allow somebody to come before a commission of inquiry and he finishes giving you his evidence, you can't turn around and use that evidence against him. Do you remember the case of Kojon Pieni and the others, the Ghana at 50 Commission report?
Yes.
When it went to court, when it went to court, Justice Murphy found now in the Supreme Court ruled that the state was going to rely on the same evidence that these accused persons had given at the commission, and that the law would not allow it. It's not straight. You see, when you read the law, it says that the police can, or the Attorney General can prosecute if they have any other evidence, independent evidence, okay? Yes, that's the law. But it appeared the guy took the position. Yes, he was seized of the matter. He knew, he understood the case more than those of us outside. From what he saw, his opinion was that the evidence he was seeing was what the accused persons had given at the commission. That's why he stopped it. As I said, I'm not in a position to challenge that because that time I wasn't near the case. But the point I'm making is that, so those are some of the dangers you face if you keep clamoring for commission of inquiries. Don't think that another judge will not look at this case and say, oh, this evidence resembles what was given at the commission of inquiry, and so I'll stop the trial. So let's be very clear. And to be very clear, from what I have seen, these soldiers must face the law. That's a criminal prosecution. So if you want a criminal prosecution, for me, I think this committee of inquiry will not hinder a criminal prosecution, because the issues of immunity will not come up. Because here, anybody who comes there is coming there voluntarily. So tomorrow, that person, in case there's a criminal prosecution, that person cannot be held to say, oh, I came and gave some voluntary evidence and now you are prosecuting me. No,
okay.
He cannot be held.
Okay.
But if you were to do the commission of inquiry, then it means that argument, Kojen Pienim and others versus the Republic versus Kojen Pienim and others, that argument can be made. And you know, when you are going to court, you can never guarantee your outcome. And so, for me, I think that let's be very clear that, look, we want a criminal prosecution in this case, even though the committee is here to sit and determine the matters.
Okay.
But we are also citizens. We've seen pictures, okay? We've seen the video footage, and we think that, look, this thing, we must have a criminal prosecution. Now we're standing that the committee is going to sit, okay?
All right.
And if that is so, I mean, really, there is no, I would go for the committee instead of the commission of inquiry.
Okay, so gentlemen, we're not done discussing EJURA, and then this video of WA and some military officers assaulting civilians pops up. We know from the military, there's a statement that they've issued, and I'm going to be reading that to you and our viewers. But we also understand that there's a delegation, including the Chief of Army Staff, who will be in WAD this morning to apologize to the people, essentially to calm matters down and then begin an investigation and punishing officers who are found to have committed, what we see in the shots. If you're watching television, we're playing back that video again to you. But this is what the Army has said. The attention of the military high command has been drawn to a video which has gone viral. In this video, some soldiers based in Wa, the regional capital of the Upper West region, are seen molesting civilians in the city without any provocation. This unprofessional conduct took place on Thursday, 1st July 2021, and at a time when the commanding officer of the soldiers and the chairman of the Regional Security Council were both out of town on official engagements. Internal disciplinary measures have been instituted to deal with all those who will be found culpable in this unprofessional conduct by the soldiers. In view of the seriousness of the matter, the Chief of the Army Staff is leading a high-powered military delegation to Wa to meet the traditional and opinion leaders to find an amicable way of resolving this unfortunate incident. The delegation will also explore means to assuage the anger of the people and promote good neighborliness. The Ghana Armed Forces once again wishes to assure the people of Wa and the general public that their safety is paramount at all times. As such, would not condone any unprofessional conduct by any member of the force. Mr. Bombande, this upsets me. The fact that military officers did this to civilians. What's your interpretation, what's your reading of what has happened?
Well, first of all, I advocate always that victims should be at the center of criminal justice. And so, in a way, I would begin by trying to appreciate the path that the military high command is taking to try and connect with the elders and community leaders of the people of Wa, and to begin to make right what has been violated in terms of the abuse of innocent civilians. And to that extent, one would want to present the argument beginning from that point. But I must quickly add, my good sister, and this goes in line with what a lawyer, Martin Kwegbu, has been presenting. The military get away with impunity, and so they will continue to be indisciplined and unprofessional, as we saw them beating people in the Upper West regional capital, Wa. I say this because when Ghanaians were horrified to see the military shoot on civilians in Techiman South, the military said they were going to investigate and deal with the circumstances that led to the killing of innocent, or let me put it, Ghanaians who were agitating around issues related to elections. What happened to their own actions of internal investigations? And so one would immediately concede that whatever they decide to do, the public has the right to know the internal disciplinary measures they will take. And not just to say it is going to be internal and they have taken actions against the perpetrators of these abuses and it ends there. Ghanaians would have a right to know what exactly happened. But over and above that, the military need to bring back professionalism and discipline in the operations of the Ghana Armed Forces. And this they need to do comprehensively. They need to reset the clock and make their men and women understand their roles as an armed forces and take away the pervasive brutality that has always been an image of the army. And when people thought that was put backwards, we then see it recurring. And for them to do this, they have to interrogate themselves with a very important question. Why is there such an environment that is pervasive of violence and the use of violence each time there is an incident that requires to be taken care of? Why is there a climate that makes people to love using violence, particularly as a professional agencies in trying to resolve issues? And I think that's where we need to take the argument from, so that the responsibility is both the discipline of the individuals who are perpetrators, but also collective in ensuring that we have a military that serves the purposes of deepening and consolidating Ghana's democratic practice, and not what we have seen, which was so unfortunate yesterday in Wa.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Mr. Bombande, and I'll address this question to both of you, Mr. Bombande for starters, and then Mr. Kwebu subsequently. Now that, Mr. Bombande, you speak of the role of the military, I want to cite two concerns and find out whether we're getting something wrong. We heard Brigadier General Nunu Mensah, who is actually a former Chief of Defense Staff, saying that, and I'm quoting him here, "A soldier's job is not to disperse the crowd. I've never learned how to disperse a crowd. It's not my job. They, that is the soldiers, are paid to shoot, not in the air, but at the chest, where it's mostly going to cause death." That is what he is quoted to have said. Then we have the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, which on Wednesday came out with their statement saying that Ghana, our government, ought to look at involving the military in crowd control in terms of internal security operations, that they shouldn't be involved, more or less. So my question to both of you, starting with you, Mr. Bombande, are we getting it wrong, these joint task forces and involving the military with the police when it comes to crowd control? And what do we do?
First of all, I want to agree with the observations that have been made, the statements that have been made, that we should not be involving the military in policing duties. The military should not be seen trying to engage in matters of crowd control and the other incidences that have occurred to bring us into the type of conversation that we're having this morning. I'll, however, admit that on specialized duties, for example, in the organization of elections, because the number of men and women in the Ghana Police Service would often be insufficient, you want joint operations that brings in the other security agencies to participate, but always with the understanding that it is the police that has the command, and that the other agencies, particularly the military, submit themselves to the command and rules of procedure, operating procedures of the police. But this would be very rare in my view. Another example would be when the level of crime becomes elevated to the point that the police alone are struggling to bring down the incidences of crime. You might want to have a specialized operation that brings in the army to play a role, but again, strictly under the directions of the police. But in the overall, I totally agree that we should have less of the army involved with civilians in managing what we are describing generally as, whether it is crowd control, whether it is curbing crime, and you name it. And if you then refer to the observation of General Nunu Mensah, it's basically to say that the military belong to the barracks, and their duties are to ensure that the territorial integrity of Ghana is well preserved and well defended. And when they are brought into activity, it is for those types of serious matters, but not to engage with the civilians as we saw in the incidents of EJURA. And let me quickly end here that if you watch, at least from the videos that I saw in EJURA, the police were managing the situation until the military started jumping out of their pickups. In other words, you had policing going on. I'm not saying that the police have succeeded in dealing with the situation, but those numbers were not numbers to worry about. It was when the military started intervening that we then saw the shootings that then led to the killings of these two people. That should tell us a lot. It should tell us that we should not be engaging the military in such crowd control.
Okay. Mr. Pebble, let me take you back to, is there anything in the military's own code of conduct or anything, you're a lawyer, help us, that says that if they suspect that somebody has stolen a property of theirs, they can organize themselves from their barracks as it happened in this situation and come back on the streets and confront civilians and punish them and assault them?
No, Mamazi, not that I'm aware of. At least I've read a bit, you know, the Armed Forces Act, and then they have the code. It doesn't allow them. The military also live under the same law. The same constitution governs all of us, okay? So there's nothing that allows them to do what they've done. It's just the impunity that has been going on over all these decades. That is what is manifesting in what they did.
Yeah, but Mr. Pebble, this is 2021, and this is not a military leadership that we have. It's a democratic dispensation. We are not under military rule here.
Yeah, Mama, I couldn't agree more. You're perfectly right. And yet there's that impunity because, you know, there's this subculture that even Ghanaians, some of our own people, anything that happens, they listen, they say, oh, we want you to bring in the soldiers. Bring in the soldiers to discipline them. Will you believe that people still think that way today? People have no regard for the rule of law. They will tell you that, oh, bring in the military. As for soldier will come and brutalize them. You know, because often the court system, you know, takes some time. People don't understand how the courts work, and they are often very interested in instant justice. You know, instant justice is very rife in our culture. We kind of like it, okay? That's what feeds into allowing the military to do what they do. Because some people like it. This video you've seen, so I've heard some people saying that, yes, that's how it is. Because when you go to court, it takes forever. People fail to appreciate that the rule of law requires that there should be due process. And so you cannot just go to court and within a week you're finished. No, there are processes. So Mama V comes back to the point that you have to do more education. More education. As long as we have this high rate of illiteracy in Ghana, these soldiers will have room to operate because some people like what they do. They say, yes, that's justice. As for soldiers, when you bring them, they will brutalize you and everything will become quiet. You say, yes. So looking at it, from what I see in this picture, I pray that the authorities will identify the soldiers and have them prosecuted because in law, it's allowed. They are prosecuted. I mean, in the civilian court, they can be prosecuted. That's separate from the court martial.
Mr. Kwebu, does that also reflect the caliber of people we're getting into the military and the police, for example? Is it reflective? Because this obviously breaches the standard protocols of what the military officers should be doing. Does that also point to the caliber of people we're getting into our armed forces?
Definitely. Definitely. You know, in every society.
Well, there appears to be a bit of a challenge there with Mr. Kwebu, you know, his connection. But Mr. Bombande, just to come in. Yeah. Okay, so Kwebu, were you responding? We've lost Mr. Kwebu. So, yeah. Mr. Bombande, very quickly, on that same beat, maybe I'll just rehash the question to you as well. Does it point to certain flaws in terms of recruitment? And going even further, there is a release on, of course, Republic Day by Kofi Totobi-Kwache, who used to be a Minister for National Security. He says, and I'm quoting here so you can react to it, the administration, that is this administration, appears to be walking through a minefield with blinders on. It must overcome this political myopia and see the risks and stakes for how high they are. The Akufo-Addo government must start to show genuine empathy and concern for the frustrations of the youth and engage them in more serious and sincere ways. Do you see that we're treading this sort of minefield, and is the reaction not enough? Does it not suffice? So two questions boxed into one.
I have read the statement of Mr. Totobi-Kwache, and I totally share in his views. And let me bring into the conversation an example that is currently happening. I want probably your viewers who do not follow the international dimensions of peace and security, if they have the time to look at what is happening in Colombia. In Colombia, the young people decided to insist on similar grounds of fix the country. And the initial reaction of the government of Colombia was to shut them out and to try to repress them. They literally shut down the whole country. But in the past 2 weeks, what the government of Colombia has done is to open up a meaningful dialogue with the youth. And things have started changing to the extent that it is the youth now helping to determine what areas of priority should be immediate in terms of governance. And without going into those details, one of your questions related to the professionalism and the role of our military. Keep in mind that it is this same Ghana Armed Forces that serves in international peacekeeping duties with a lot of respect in their conduct. And I'm not just saying it because I read it. I've seen them in the field of some peacekeeping theaters of operation, and I've appreciated, just like I've listened to people appreciate their role. Now, that same Ghana Armed Forces cannot be respected in peacekeeping duties outside, and back in their own country, they continue with the wayward attitude of the abuse of the rights of civilians. So there is something that is definitely wrong. And that is why it begins with the environment, with the climate in which the armed forces operates when they are home here in Ghana. And all the discussions in the past, including the observations of Mr. Totobi Kwachi and the questions that you have been framing, all of them become relevant. From how you recruit, how you train, how you ensure discipline, the hierarchy in terms of respect in the chain of command, and how the military is made to understand that you submit always to civilian rule in a democratic state, and you do not take the law in your own hands. All these become part of a comprehensive package that needs to constantly be visited. And to do that, training must be happening regularly. It does not mean after training that will be the end. They need to be trained and retrained. They need to be trained in the respect for human rights, the rule of law, and how to operate in a democratic state. If all these continue to be enhanced, it helps a lot. But in the generality, the pervasive environment that I have made reference to, we should all keep in mind that at the end of the day, the democratic republic that we all want and that we all enjoy, yes, it's what we all aspire. We want to consolidate, we want to deepen, but it also comes with responsibilities. It comes with hard work, and therefore political decision making and how the peace, the unity, and the stability of the country is constantly in the forefront in all our activities, particularly for those who have had the privilege to serve, whether currently or in the past, becomes very important. In other words, my main point is, how do we see a collective duty in our political space that now makes it possible for the contributions that make Ghana a respected democratic state to happen? When you have a situation in which our polarization overwhelmingly becomes the norm rather than the exception, then people feel that when they are in discipline, they would be able to be protected simply because the environment and the dynamics of politics favors the protection of a few miscreants because they want to believe that they are associated with a political dispensation. That accelerates unprofessionalism, and it makes it very difficult for the consolidation of democracy to take place. Now, if things go then beyond unmanageable levels, then we would all be regretting very deeply and asking ourselves, where were we? How did we allow this to happen? And that is why this is a serious matter, and it therefore must be responded to at the level to which it deserves seriousness in terms of bringing back confidence into the people and ensuring that we no longer begin to see some of these incidences.
Well, wrap up comments, gentlemen. I'll start with you, Mr. Kpebu, on so far some of... Oh, Kwebu is still not with us. Well, we were not able to get back to him. We would have been joined as well by Professor Enning, but unfortunately, it appears the lines are not aiding us. So maybe then we'll wrap up with your comments, Mama V, if you don't have anything, other dimensions to look at when it comes to
Mr. Bombande, we thank you for your time. I guess we wait to see what happens with this high-powered delegation that has been sent to WA to first of all apologize, and then I guess we look forward to investigations. I just wanted to ask, just before you leave though, if a civilian is being brutalized, who do you report it to?
If a civilian is being brutalized, you mean by the military?
By the military.
By the military, just as we've seen happen in WA. Where do you run for help?
Yeah, the recourse to the civilian is to report to the police. But then the question then is, how does the police engage with the military when the brutality or when the perpetration is coming from the military? And that is why we have the military police. And the military police are supposed to discipline their own military. And so the connection then would be that the issue will be taken up at the level of the military, and that it will get to the level of the military police, effecting the type of criminal justice that we want. But it's probably more complicated than the way I have explained it. But whichever way we want to look at it, Lawyer Kwebu has underscored the importance of prosecution, which basically says individuals cannot hide from any institution and continue to reinforce impunity. And that it's precisely because of impunity that people have the audacity to repeatedly commit the same crimes. And that if at the end of the day, the military can be made to understand that from the uniforms you wear to the boots that protect your feet to everything about your life is from the taxpayers' money. And you cannot turn on those civilians who pay taxes and those civilians who maintain you to brutalize you. It becomes part of the education. It becomes part of what I call bringing back the professionalism. But I also continuously add that environment in which the use of violence, the use of force has become so pervasive must end. And it must end with the type of discourse, that discourse in our politics, that discourse in leadership, particularly decision-making, being role models, and all of us being responsible. That sometimes you might be in a studio, in a media house, and you think you can speak with threats, and your language, which is verbal violence, becomes incendiary and provokes. And you think after your contribution, you walk home. But people take that and misread it, and it increases the climate of insecurity, the climate of violence.
Right.
So I look at it as a collective responsibility, but in the context of this morning's discussion, it is more in the military and the military hierarchy at the end of the day to conclude. When you ask, how do we go about it? They must show the will. Okay. They must show that they are prepared to discipline their own men and women, and that there will be a new military learning from these very unfortunate incidences.
And on that note, we thank you for your time, Mr. Bombande. Thank you for joining this conversation and helping us with the analysis.
We're also grateful to Martin Kwebu, who also joined us. The connection dropped a while ago. And Professor Kwesi Enning, who attempted joining us, but owing to technical challenges, could not actually make it through.
All right, so Rafiq Salam is our correspondent in the Upper West region. He will be bringing us a lot more updates in terms of what's happening on the ground with the visit by the military.